The morning sun glinted off the sleek black Tesla as Dr. Amara Johnson drove down the quiet coastal road. She hummed along to Beyoncé, allowing herself this rare moment of peace before her day began in earnest. The sea breeze flowed through her slightly open window, carrying the salt air that reminded her of childhood summers. Amara checked her watch, a simple yet elegant timepiece, not the flashy, diamond-encrusted kind people expected billionaires to wear. She was running early for her meeting with the mayor about funding new community centers in underserved neighborhoods. Perfect. She'd have time to stop for her favorite cold brew coffee. At 42, Amara had built Tech Fusion from a small startup in her garage to a global tech empire valued at over $20 billion. Her facial recognition software had revolutionized security systems worldwide, while her strict ethical guidelines for AI had set new industry standards. Yet despite her success, she still drove herself most places, preferring the normalcy of it. The wail of a police siren cut through her thoughts. Amara glanced at the speedometer. She was going exactly 5 miles under the limit. She checked her rearview mirror, seeing the flashing lights of a police cruiser. With a sigh, she signaled and pulled onto the shoulder, the tires crunching over gravel. Just routine, she murmured to herself as she reached for her purse to retrieve her license. In the years since her rise to prominence, she'd been stopped a handful of times. It usually ended with an officer recognizing her and becoming flustered, sometimes even asking for a photo. Amara always declined politely. She rolled down her window completely as the officer approached. His sunglasses reflected her face back at her, his expression unreadable beneath the rim of his hat. "License and registration," he said, not bothering with the greeting. The name on his badge read Dawson. "Good morning, Officer Dawson," Amara said pleasantly, handing over the requested items. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" Officer Dawson studied her license, his face tightening almost imperceptibly when he read her name. He ignored her question. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Amara blinked in surprise. "Excuse me? Is there a problem with my—" "I said step out of the vehicle." His hand moved to rest on his holstered weapon, not drawing it, but making sure she noticed. A cold feeling washed over Amara. She'd been here before, long ago, before her face appeared in Fortune magazine. She took a deep breath and reached slowly for her phone. "I'm going to call my attorney," she said calmly. Officer Dawson leaned in suddenly, his face inches from hers. "You think your money makes you special? Step out now or I'll add resisting to the charges." "Charges for what?" Amara kept her voice level despite the hammering in her chest. "I wasn't speeding. My registration is current. My lights are working. I'd like to know why I've been stopped. Out. Now." His voice had dropped to a dangerous growl. Calculating her options, Amara unbuckled her seatbelt. She'd comply, then file a complaint later. This wasn't worth escalating. As she opened her door, she noticed a pickup truck slowing down across the road, a middle-aged woman peering out curiously. "Hands where I can see them," Dawson barked as Amara stepped onto the gravel. "My hands are right here," she said, holding them slightly away from her body, palms forward. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Dr. Amara Johnson. I have a meeting with Mayor. Face the vehicle and place your hands on the hood." Dawson cut her off. The pickup truck had now pulled over. The woman inside had her phone out, holding it up in their direction. Amara felt a mixture of relief and humiliation. "Officer, this is unnecessary," Amara said, still maintaining her composure. "If you could just tell me—" She never finished her sentence. Officer Dawson grabbed her arm, spinning her toward the car with unnecessary force. Amara lost her balance on the uneven gravel, her ankle twisting as she fell to one knee. Pain shot up her leg. "I said face the vehicle," Dawson shouted, now towering over her. Across the road, the woman had gotten out of her pickup. "Hey," she called out. "I'm filming this." 2 more cars had slowed now. A teenager on a bicycle had stopped entirely, also pulling out a phone. Amara rose shakily to her feet, wincing at the pain in her ankle. "Officer Dawson, your badge number is 4721. I will be reporting this unnecessary use of force to your superiors." Something flashed in Dawson's eyes. Surprise? Perhaps that she'd noted his badge number, or anger that she was threatening to report him. He moved closer, his body language intimidating. "You people always think you're above the law," he said. his voice low enough that only she could hear. The words hit Amara like a physical blow. You people. She'd heard those words before, spoken in that same tone, as a child growing up in a small town, as a college student trying to get funding for her first invention, as a startup founder meeting with skeptical investors, but not since she'd become Dr. Amara Johnson, billionaire tech CEO. Not since her face had appeared on magazine covers. Not since politicians sought her endorsements and celebrities wanted to be seen at her charity galas. Until today. Officer, she said, her voice now steel, I am going to reach for my phone to call your chief. I've done nothing wrong. Touch that phone and you're under arrest, Dawson snapped, loud enough for the gathering onlookers to hear. A new vehicle pulled up behind the police cruiser, a battered blue sedan. A young man in his 20s stepped out, wearing the uniform of a local coffee shop. He had his phone out too, already recording. Dr. Johnson, he called out, recognition in his voice. Are you okay? The situation was escalating in a way Amara hadn't anticipated. What had begun as a routine stop had transformed into a public spectacle. She could see the headlines now. Tech billionaire in roadside confrontation with police. She had choices to make in a split second. Cause a scene and risk unpredictable consequences? Submit quietly and address it through proper channels later? Use her influence to intimidate the officer? The coffee shop worker took a step forward, still recording. My sister works at your foundation, he said. You paid for her college. Officer Dawson glanced back at the growing crowd, seeming to realize for the first time that he had an audience, and that they recognized who Amara was. Amara made her decision. She straightened her posture, ignoring the throbbing in her ankle. Officer Dawson, she said clearly so everyone could hear, I have complied with all your instructions despite your failure to inform me why I've been detained. I'm now requesting that you call your supervisor to the scene. Dawson's jaw clenched. He looked from Amara to the crowd, now numbering almost a dozen people, all with phones pointed in their direction. His hand fell away from his weapon. Get back in your car, he muttered. I'm sorry? Amara raised an eyebrow. You're free to go. Just a routine traffic stop. His voice was still hard, but uncertainty had crept in. A routine traffic stop that required me to exit my vehicle and resulted in injury, Amara replied, gesturing to her ankle, which was already beginning to swell. I'll need your supervisor's information, please. The coffee shop worker had edged closer. I've got the whole thing recorded, Dr. Johnson, he called out. From when he made you get out of the car. Officer Dawson's face darkened. He took a step toward Amara, his body language threatening despite the audience. You're causing a public disturbance, he said, reaching for his handcuffs. A new siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. Someone in the crowd must have called for backup. Amara stood her ground even as Dawson moved toward her with handcuffs. The growing crowd murmured in disbelief. The coffee shop worker's video was already streaming live, comments and shares multiplying by the second. In that moment, as Officer Dawson reached for her wrist, Amara wasn't thinking about her billions or her company's stock price. She was thinking about her parents who had taught her to stand up for herself, but also to pick her battles wisely. She was thinking about the community centers she hoped to build, where young people could learn technology skills regardless of their background. And she was thinking about tomorrow's headlines, which would now inevitably feature this confrontation. This moment that would define her in the public eye in a new way, not just as a tech innovator, but as someone forced to confront the same prejudices she'd worked so hard to rise above. The approaching police car rounded the bend, lights flashing. Officer Dawson hesitated, handcuffs still open in his hand. The story of Dr. Amara Johnson and Officer Dawson was just beginning. Neither of them knew it yet, but what happened next would change both their lives and many others, forever. By evening, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. Amara sat in her home office, a glass of untouched red wine on the desk beside her. The wall of windows overlooked the city lights below, a view that usually brought her peace. Tonight, it failed to calm the storm inside her. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since she'd left the scene. The arriving officer had been Lieutenant Rivera, who recognized her immediately and profusely apologized. Officer Dawson had been ordered back to the station while Rivera took Amara's statement. By then, the crowd had grown to nearly 30 people, many filming, some shouting questions. "Dr. Johnson, look at this," said Zoe, her chief of staff, turning her laptop around. Zoe had arrived at Amara's home an hour after the incident, canceling all of Amara's meetings for the day. "It's trending on every platform. Amara Johnson and our Officer Dawson are the top hashtags nationwide." Amara glanced at the screen, wincing as she shifted in her chair. Her ankle, now properly wrapped in ice, still throbbed. The doctor had confirmed it was just a sprain, but she'd need to stay off it for a few days. "What's the narrative?" Amara asked, though she already knew. The story was playing out exactly as she had predicted it would in that moment on the roadside. "Mixed," Zoe replied, scrolling through comments. "Most people are outraged on your behalf. Your supporters are calling for Officer Dawson to be fired. The police union has released a statement saying they're investigating the incident but cautioning against rush to judgment." Zoe made air quotes with her fingers. "And the other side?" Zoe hesitated. "Some people are saying you used your status to escalate a routine stop, that you should have just complied." The usual victim blaming, Amara nodded, unsurprised. She'd built her career in tech, where being the only black woman in the room was so common it had stopped being noteworthy to her years ago. She'd faced skepticism, condescension, and outright hostility on her journey from student to startup founder to CEO. She'd learned to navigate those waters with a calm she didn't always feel inside. But this was different. This was public. This was physical. This would affect not just her but her company, her foundation, and the communities she worked to support. Her phone rang, her personal line, not the business one. The screen showed her mother's face. "I need to take this," Amara said to Zoe, who nodded and stepped out of the office. "Mom?" "I'm fine," Amara said immediately upon answering. "Don't you I'm fine me." "Amara Joy Johnson." Her mother's voice was tight with controlled emotion. "I had to find out my daughter was assaulted by a police officer from my neighbor who saw it on the internet." "I was going to call you tonight," Amara said, feeling a pang of guilt. "I wanted to wait until things calmed down a bit." "Things are not going to calm down," her mother replied. "Your father is ready to drive up there right now." I had to hide his car keys. Despite everything, Amara smiled. Her father, a retired high school principal, had always been her fiercest defender. "Tell Dad I'm okay. Really. Just a sprained ankle and a bruised ego. This isn't about your ankle, baby. This is about what could have happened. If people hadn't been filming..." Her mother didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. They both knew how differently the story could have ended. "I know, Mom," Amara said softly. "Trust me, I know." After reassuring her parents further and promising to call again in the morning, Amara ended the call. She opened her laptop and began to type, drafting a statement, not as the billionaire CEO of Tech Fusion, but as Amara Johnson, citizen. A knock at her office door interrupted her thoughts. Zoe poked her head in. "Your legal team is here," she announced. Amara nodded, closing her laptop. "Send them in." 4 people filed into the room, 3 men and 1 woman, all wearing expressions that mixed concern with the particular energy lawyers get when presented with a high-profile case. "Dr. Johnson," began Howard, the head of her legal department. "First and foremost, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Howard," Amara replied, gesturing for them to sit. "What are my options?" For the next hour, they outlined possible courses of action: a civil suit against Officer Dawson and the police department, a formal complaint through internal affairs, a press conference to address the incident. Each option was presented with its potential outcomes and risks. "What happens to Officer Dawson if I pursue this?" Amara asked. The lawyers exchanged glances. "Best case scenario for accountability? He loses his job, possibly faces charges for excessive use of force," said Diane, the newest member of the legal team. "Worst case? He gets a slap on the wrist, maybe some desk duty, then returns to the force." Amara nodded slowly. "And if I don't pursue it?" "The department might still discipline him internally, especially with the video evidence," Howard explained. "But without your formal complaint, it's less likely to result in serious consequences. There's also the matter of public perception," added Roger, another lawyer. "If you don't take action, some might see it as tacit acceptance of what happened." Amara stood, careful to put minimal weight on her injured ankle, and moved to the windows. The city stretched before her, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Somewhere out there was Officer Dawson, perhaps sitting with his own advisors planning his defense. Somewhere were the people who had stopped to film, who had witnessed her humiliation and her strength. Somewhere were young black girls who would hear about what happened to her and watch how she responded. She turned back to the room. I want to talk to the police chief directly. Not through intermediaries, not with prepared statements. A conversation face to face. The lawyers began to protest simultaneously. Amara held up her hand. I understand the risks. But I didn't build my company by playing it safe, and I won't navigate this by hiding behind lawyers. She paused. No offense intended. None taken, Howard said with a small smile. But as your counsel, I have to advise against this. At least let us set parameters for the conversation, prepare you for... I've been preparing for this my entire life, Howard. Amara interrupted gently. Set up the meeting. After the lawyers left, Amara found herself alone again. She checked her phone and saw dozens of missed calls and messages, from board members, celebrity friends, political allies offering support. One message caught her eye, from the coffee shop worker who had filmed the incident. He'd somehow found her private email. Dr. Johnson, it read. My name is Luis Reyes. I work at Billionaire Coffee on Main Street. I was there today when that officer mistreated you. The video I took has been shared everywhere, but I wanted you to know I'm willing to testify or help however I can. You funded the scholarship that put my sister through nursing school. Our family will never forget that. Whatever you decide to do about this, we've got your back. Tears sprang to Amara's eyes, the first she'd allowed herself since the incident. She'd built walls around herself for so long, had trained herself to swallow pain and anger and move forward. But sometimes unexpected kindness broke through those walls. She typed a reply thanking Luis and asking him to send her the original unedited video. As midnight approached, Amara's phone rang again. An unknown number. Dr. Johnson speaking, she answered cautiously. Dr. Johnson, this is Robert Winters, said a deep, gravelly voice. I apologize for calling so late. I'm the former police chief of Riverdale County. I saw what happened to you today. Amara sat up straighter. Former chief? May I ask why you're calling, Mr. Winters? There was a pause. Because Officer Dawson was one of mine. I trained him myself years ago, and because what I saw today made me sick to my stomach. Amara said nothing, waiting. I've been working on police reform since I retired 3 years ago, Winters continued. With limited success, I'll admit. But what happened to you? It could be a catalyst for real change. If you're willing to consider a different approach. I'm listening, Amara said, reaching for a pen. As Robert Winters outlined his thoughts, Amara began to see a path forward that she hadn't considered, one that might create lasting change rather than just punishment. When she finally went to bed that night, her mind was racing with possibilities. The incident had been traumatic and humiliating, yes, but perhaps it could also become something else, the beginning of something important. Tomorrow she would meet with the current police chief. She would hear what he had to say, what accountability he was prepared to offer, and then she would propose something unexpected, a collaboration rather than a confrontation. As she drifted toward sleep, Amara thought about Officer Dawson, not with anger, but with determination. Whatever had shaped him into the man who had treated her with such contempt, perhaps it wasn't too late to reshape him into something better, and in doing so reshape others like him. It wouldn't be easy. Some would call her foolish for even trying. But Amara Johnson hadn't become a billionaire by taking the easy path. The path to real change never was. The police station buzzed with nervous energy as Amara walked through the front doors. She wore a simple navy pantsuit, powerful but not flashy, and walked with a slight limp, her ankle still tender from the incident 3 days ago. All conversation stopped as she entered. Eyes followed her, some curious, some wary, some openly hostile. A young officer at the front desk stood up so quickly he knocked over his coffee. Dr. Johnson, he stammered. They're expecting you in the chief's office. Amara nodded, following as he led her down a hallway lined with photos of officers past and present. She noticed a few black and brown faces among them, but not many. She wondered which one was Robert Winters. Chief Thomas Peterson was waiting outside his office door. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much, he extended his hand. Dr. Johnson, thank you for coming. His handshake was firm, but not aggressive. Please, come in. The office was spartanly furnished, a desk, bookshelves, a few chairs, and a wall of commendations and certificates. Amara noticed a family photo, the chief with a woman and 2 children all smiling at the camera. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" Peterson asked. "Water would be fine, thank you." As Peterson stepped out briefly to request water, Amara was surprised to see another man already seated in the office. He stood as she entered, a broad-shouldered black man in his 60s with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "Robert Winters," he said, extending his hand. "We spoke on the phone." Amara shook his hand, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Chief Peterson and I go back a long way," Winters explained. "I hope you don't mind my presence." Before Amara could respond, Peterson returned, closing the door behind him. "Dr. Johnson, first and foremost, I want to apologize for what happened to you," Peterson began, sitting behind his desk. "Officer Dawson's behavior was unacceptable and does not reflect the values of this department." Amara studied him, looking for signs of insincerity. She found none, but she'd learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. "What actions have you taken so far?" she asked directly. Peterson cleared his throat. "Officer Dawson has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Internal Affairs has begun reviewing all of his previous arrests and traffic stops for patterns of behavior." "And?" Amara pressed. Peterson glanced at Winters, then back to Amara. "And preliminary findings suggest this wasn't an isolated incident. Officer Dawson has had 7 complaints filed against him in the past 3 years. 3 specifically mentioning racial bias. Yet he was still on active duty," Amara noted, her voice cool. "Yes," Peterson acknowledged. "The complaints were investigated, but none had video evidence or enough corroboration to result in serious disciplinary action." He paused. "That's not an excuse. It's a failure of our system." A knock at the door interrupted them, an assistant bringing water. When she left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. "Dr. Johnson," Winters said finally, "I spent 30 years on the force, the last 8 as chief. I know this department's strengths and its weaknesses. What happened to you was inexcusable, but it's also symptomatic of deeper problems." "I'm aware," Amara replied. She took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. "The day after I was assaulted by one of your officers, I had my team pull data on all traffic stops in this county for the past 5 years, broken down by race, gender, and outcome." Peterson's eyebrows rose. "That data isn't publicly available in that form." "I have good data scientists," Amara said simply. The results were troubling but not surprising. Black drivers are 4 times more likely to be asked to exit their vehicles during routine stops. They're 6 times more likely to have their cars searched, and they're 9 times more likely to have force used against them. Peterson didn't dispute her findings. "We've been working to address these disparities, not effectively," Amara cut in. "And firing Officer Dawson while necessary won't solve the underlying issues." "That's why I wanted to speak with you," Winters said, leaning forward. "I've been developing a training program since my retirement, focused on unconscious bias, de-escalation techniques, and community engagement. But it's been difficult to get departments to adopt it without evidence of its effectiveness." Amara turned to him, intrigued despite her skepticism. "Go on." "The program uses virtual reality simulations based on real-world encounters, placing officers in scenarios from multiple perspectives, including as the civilian being stopped or questioned. It uses biometric feedback to help officers recognize their stress responses and teach them to manage them better." "And you think this would have prevented what happened to me?" Amara asked. "I can't say for certain," Winters admitted, "but I believe it would reduce incidents like yours significantly." Peterson cleared his throat. "Dr. Johnson, I invited Robert here today because I want to implement his program department-wide, but we lack the technology and funding to do so effectively." Now Amara understood. They wanted her money. Her first instinct was to refuse. Why should she fund training for officers who had failed to address these problems for decades? As if reading her thoughts, Winters added, "I'm not asking you to write a check and walk away, Dr. Johnson. I'm proposing a partnership. Your company's expertise in AI and interface design could take this program to the next level, and your direct involvement would ensure accountability." Amara stood up, needing to move despite her sore ankle. She walked to the window overlooking the station's parking lot. Officers came and went, some laughing, some serious. She wondered how many were like Dawson, and how many were simply trying to do their jobs well in a broken system. She turned back to face the two men. "What about Officer Dawson?" Peterson and Winters exchanged glances. "What do you want to happen to him?" Peterson asked carefully. It was a loaded question. Part of her wanted Dawson fired, publicly humiliated the way she had been. But another part, the part that had built a foundation focused on second chances and community transformation, wondered if there might be another way. "I want to meet with him," Amara said finally. Both men looked startled. "Dr. Johnson, I'm not sure that's advisable," Peterson began. "I'm not asking for permission, Chief Peterson," Amara replied firmly. "I'm telling you what I need for this conversation to continue. I want to look Officer Dawson in the eye. I want to hear what he has to say for himself. Then I'll decide whether your proposal is worth my time and resources." Peterson hesitated, then nodded. "I'll arrange it, but his union representative will insist on being present." "Fine," Amara agreed. "One more thing. I want access to all the data on your department's policing practices, not just what my team could gather. Complete transparency. That's unusual." Peterson hedged. "So is a partnership between a police department and a tech billionaire," Amara countered. "If we're going to do this, we do it my way. Full transparency, measurable outcomes, and real consequences for failure." Winters smiled slightly, the first hint of emotion he'd shown. "You remind me of my daughter," he said. "She's a civil rights attorney. Never takes no for an answer either." "Smart woman," Amara replied. "The smartest?" Winters agreed. "She's been fighting this battle from the outside. I've been fighting it from the inside. Neither approach has worked as well as we'd hoped. Maybe it's time for something new." Amara considered his words. She had spent years building technology that changed how the world operated. Perhaps this was another system that needed disruption, not from the outside or the inside, but through an entirely new approach. "Arrange the meeting with Officer Dawson," she said to Peterson. "After that, we'll talk about next steps." As she left the police station, reporters swarmed around her. Cameras flashed, questions flew from all directions. Amara had prepared a statement, but looking at the eager faces of the journalists, she decided on a different approach. "I came here today seeking justice," she told them, her voice clear and steady. "Not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been unfairly targeted because of the color of their skin. What I found was an opportunity for something more meaningful than punishment. I found a chance for real change." The reporters pressed closer, shouting more questions. "That's all for now," Amara said. "But this conversation is just beginning." As her driver helped her into her car, Amara checked her phone. A text from Zoe. "How did it go?" Amara typed back, "Unexpected. We may have found an ally. Set up a meeting with the R&D team tomorrow. I have an idea." She leaned back against the leather seat as the car pulled away from the curb. The path ahead was unclear, filled with potential pitfalls. Her board might resist. The public might not understand. Officer Dawson might prove unwilling or unable to change. But for the first time since the incident, Amara felt something close to hope. Not the naive hope of someone who hadn't experienced the world's harshness, but the tempered hope of someone who had faced that harshness and still believed in the possibility of better. Her phone buzzed again, a news alert. The headline read, "Tech billionaire and former police chief join forces after roadside incident." The story was already taking an unexpected turn. Amara smiled slightly. She had always enjoyed surprising people. Officer Thomas Dawson looked nothing like the intimidating figure who had towered over Amara on the roadside a week ago. Seated across from her in the small conference room, he seemed smaller somehow, his uniform replaced by a button-down shirt and slacks. His eyes darted around the room, refusing to meet hers. Beside him sat a stern-faced woman in a crisp suit, his union representative, Amara presumed. Robert Winters had insisted on being present as well, a neutral third party to facilitate what promised to be a difficult conversation. "Dr. Johnson," Winters began, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Officer Dawson has something he'd like to say." Dawson cleared his throat. "I've prepared a statement." "No," Amara interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "No prepared statements. I want to hear your own words, Officer Dawson. Why did you treat me the way you did?" The union representative shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Johnson, I must advise my client that anything he says could potentially be used in future legal proceedings." "I'm aware," Amara replied, not taking her eyes off Dawson. And Officer Dawson should know that whether there are legal proceedings depends largely on what happens in this room today. Dawson glanced at his representative, who gave a tight nod. I was doing my job, he began defensively. You were driving erratically. That's not true, Amara said calmly. The dashcam footage shows I was driving under the speed limit, using my signals appropriately. Try again. Dawson's jaw tightened. For a moment, Amara thought he might storm out. Then, surprisingly, his shoulders sagged. I don't know what you want me to say, he admitted. The truth would be a good start, Amara suggested. Dawson looked up, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. The truth? The truth is I didn't know who you were when I pulled you over. I saw an expensive car in an area where we've had problems with drug trafficking. An expensive car with a black driver, Amara added. Dawson's face flushed. It wasn't about race, wasn't it? Amara pressed. The data suggests otherwise. Your history suggests otherwise. The union representative started to object, but Winters held up a hand. Let him answer. Dawson ran a hand over his face. Look, I've been on the force for 12 years. I've seen things you couldn't imagine. I've had partners injured by suspects who seemed harmless at first. When you refused to immediately comply, I asked why I was being pulled over, Amara corrected. That's my right. Yeah, well, in my experience, people who question authority usually have something to hide. Amara leaned forward. In my experience, people who abuse authority usually have something to hide. The room fell silent. Amara could feel her heart pounding, but she kept her expression neutral. She hadn't come here to trade accusations, but she needed Dawson to acknowledge what had really happened. Officer Dawson, she said, softening her tone slightly. I run a multi-billion-dollar company. I've faced hostility and skepticism at every step of my career. I've developed a pretty good sense for when someone is judging me based on my actions versus when they're judging me based on who they think I am. Dawson looked away. When you approached my car, Amara continued, what was the first thing you thought? I don't remember. Yes, you do. Dawson's eyes flicked to his representative, who nodded slightly. I thought, how does someone like that afford a car like this? He paused. And yes, by someone like that, I meant a black person. Amara nodded, appreciating his honesty despite the content of his words. And that assumption colored everything that followed. Maybe, Dawson admitted reluctantly. Definitely, Amara corrected. And it's not just you. It's a pattern, one that costs lives. Winters, who had been silent, now spoke. Officer Dawson, do you know why I asked to be here today? Dawson shook his head. Because 8 years ago I was you, Winters said. I made the same assumptions. I treated people the same way, until I pulled over a teenager who happened to be my pastor's son. The look in that boy's eyes, pure fear, it changed me. Made me question everything about how I did my job. Dawson listened, his expression unreadable. That boy could have been another statistic, Winters continued. Instead, he became a wake-up call. For me, and eventually for the department I led. I'm not proud of who I was then, but I'm proud of the changes I made afterward. Amara watched the exchange with interest. This was an angle she hadn't considered. Dawson seeing himself in Winters, a man who had made similar mistakes but found a path to redemption. What's going to happen to me? Dawson asked finally, looking between Amara and Winters. That depends partly on you, Amara replied. I came here today to see if there was any point in trying to work with you rather than against you. Work with me? Dawson seemed confused. Amara nodded. Chief Peterson and Mr. Winters have proposed implementing a new training program throughout the department. I'm considering funding it through my foundation and enhancing it with my company's technology. She paused. It would focus on unconscious bias, de-escalation techniques, and community engagement. Understanding dawned on Dawson's face. And you want me to be what, the guinea pig? I want you to be the first participant, Amara corrected. The test case that proves change is possible. And if I refuse? Then I pursue legal action against you and the department, Amara said simply. I have the resources and the evidence to make that very uncomfortable for everyone involved. The union representative leaned over to whisper something to Dawson. He listened, then shook his head. I want to know what this program would involve, he said directly to Amara. I'm not agreeing to anything blindly. Amara gestured to Winters. who pulled out a tablet and passed it to Dawson. The core of the program is experiential, Winters explained as Dawson began to scroll through the proposal. Using VR technology, officers experience encounters from the civilian perspective, particularly those of people of color, who often have very different expectations and fears during police interactions. So it's about making us feel guilty, Dawson said skeptically. It's about building empathy, Amara countered. About recognizing how your actions and assumptions affect others, Dawson continued reading. Community service requirements? Winters nodded. Meaningful engagement with the communities you police. Not just showing up at a school career day, but ongoing relationships with community organizations. And ongoing evaluation, Dawson noted, his tone suggesting he didn't like that part. Yes, Amara confirmed. Regular assessment of your interactions, particularly with minorities. Body cam footage would be reviewed not just when complaints are filed, but as part of routine performance evaluation. Dawson set down the tablet. And if I do all this, I keep my job? If you complete the program successfully and demonstrate real change, yes, Amara said. Though you'd be reassigned to community liaison duties for at least a year. And you? Dawson asked. What do you get out of this? It was a perceptive question, one that made Amara reassess her impression of the man. Data, she answered honestly, evidence of whether programs like this can actually create meaningful change in policing. And if it works with you, an officer with a history of problematic behavior, it strengthens the case for wider implementation. Dawson nodded slowly. So I'm the worst-case scenario. If I can change, anyone can. Precisely, Amara agreed. The room fell silent again as Dawson considered his options. Amara watched him, trying to gauge whether he was capable of the transformation this program would require. Finally, he looked up. I have conditions, such as, Winters asked. First, this stays between us until the program is complete. No media circus, no public humiliation. Agreed, Amara said, though the incident itself is already public. Second, I want input into how the program develops. If something's not working or feels like propaganda, I want to be able to say so. Winters nodded. That's fair. We need honest feedback. And third, Dawson said, looking directly at Amara, I want you involved personally. Not just your money or your company, you. Amara raised an eyebrow. Why? Because if this is about understanding different perspectives, then you need to understand mine too, Dawson said simply. Not all cops are monsters. We face impossible situations, make split-second decisions, deal with the worst of humanity daily. That takes a toll. It was a reasonable point, Amara had to admit. If she wanted Dawson to see beyond his assumptions about her, perhaps she needed to do the same for him. Regular check-ins, she offered, monthly to review your progress and hear your perspective. Dawson extended his hand. Deal. Amara hesitated only briefly before shaking it. His grip was firm but not aggressive, respectful in a way their first encounter had not been. This won't be easy, she warned. Real change never is. I know, Dawson acknowledged, but I'd rather try than lose everything I've worked for. As they left the meeting room, Winters fell into step beside Amara. That went better than I expected, he admitted. We'll see, Amara replied. The real test comes when he faces the actual program, not just the idea of it. True, Winters agreed, but it's a start. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Amara's driver waited by her car, while news vans clustered at the edge of the property. Reporters still hungry for updates on the story. They'll want to know what happened in there. Winters nodded toward the journalists. They'll have to wait, Amara replied. Some stories need time to unfold properly. As she slid into the back seat of her car, Amara felt strangely energized. The path ahead was uncertain, full of potential pitfalls and disappointments. Officer Dawson might prove unwilling or unable to change. The program might fail to deliver meaningful results, but for the first time since that day on the roadside, Amara felt like something good might come from the experience. Not just justice for herself, but perhaps a small step towards something larger, more transformative. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. How did it go? Amara typed back a single word. Promising. 6 months later, Amara stood at the podium in the community center she'd helped rebuild in the heart of Riverdale's most underserved neighborhood. Camera flashes lit up the room as journalists documented this moment, the official launch of the Police Transformation Initiative. Behind her sat a diverse group, police officers in uniform, community leaders, tech experts from her company, and most surprisingly, Officer Thomas Dawson, now dressed in the navy blue polo shirt that identified him as a community liaison officer. 6 months ago, I experienced something that happens to too many people of color in this country, Amara began. I was pulled over, mistreated, and humiliated simply because I didn't fit someone's idea of who belonged in an expensive car. The room was silent, all eyes on her. I had options after that incident. I could have pursued legal action. I could have used my platform and resources to demand punishment. Many people advised me to do exactly that. She paused, scanning the faces before her. Instead, I chose a different path. Not because I was feeling particularly generous, this earned a small laugh from the audience, but because I wanted something more than temporary satisfaction. I wanted lasting change. Amara gestured to the people seated behind her. Working with former police chief Robert Winters, current Chief Peterson, and the team at Tech Fusion, we've developed a comprehensive training program that uses virtual reality, biometric feedback, and community engagement to address the root causes of biased policing. She clicked a button, and the screen behind her lit up with statistics and images from the pilot program. Over the past 6 months, we've tested this program with 30 officers, including some with previous complaints about their conduct. The results have been promising. A 63% reduction in use of force incidents, a 48% increase in positive community feedback, and perhaps most importantly, a 57% improvement in officers' ability to de-escalate potentially volatile situations. Amara stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage, making her presentation more personal. But numbers only tell part of the story. The real transformation happens one person at a time, which is why I'd like to invite Officer Thomas Dawson to share his experience. A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone in the room knew who Dawson was. The officer from the viral video, the one who had kicked a black billionaire to the ground. Many had questioned Amara's decision to include him in the program, rather than press charges. Dawson approached the podium slowly. He looked nervous but determined. 6 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my career, he began bluntly. I let my assumptions and biases dictate how I treated another human being. I abused my authority and violated the oath I took to protect and serve. He glanced at Amara, who gave him an encouraging nod. When Dr. Johnson offered me a chance to be part of this program instead of facing termination, I accepted for selfish reasons. I wanted to keep my job, but what I didn't expect was how the program would change me. Dawson described his experiences in the virtual reality modules, which had placed him in scenarios as a civilian being confronted by police. He talked about the community service hours he'd spent working with youth in the very neighborhood where they now stood. And he spoke candidly about the bi-weekly conversations he'd had with Amara, which had started as tense check-ins but evolved into genuine dialogue. I won't stand here and claim I'm completely transformed, Dawson said honestly. Unlearning biases I didn't even know I had is an ongoing process. But I'm committed to that process, not just for myself but for every person I encounter in this uniform. As Dawson stepped back, Amara returned to the podium. Starting today, the Police Transformation Initiative will be implemented department-wide in Riverdale County. By this time next year, every officer will have completed the program, and we're already in talks with 5 other police departments across the country interested in adopting it. She smiled slightly. And yes, Officer Dawson will be one of the program's trainers, sharing his experience with other officers who might recognize themselves in his story. The announcement was met with applause, though Amara noted some skeptical faces in the crowd. She understood their doubts. One program couldn't fix decades of systemic issues. One transformed officer didn't guarantee widespread change. After the formal presentation, Amara made her way through the crowd, answering questions and accepting both congratulations and criticisms. She spotted a familiar face, Luis, the coffee shop worker who had filmed the original incident. He was now wearing a Tech Fusion ID badge. She'd hired him as part of the community outreach team after discovering his talent for communication. Dr. Johnson, Louise greeted her with a smile. My grandmother wants to know when you're coming over for dinner again. She says you need to eat more. Amara laughed. Tell her soon, once things settled down a bit. Over the months, she'd gotten to know Luis's family, particularly his grandmother, who had become something of a surrogate mother figure to her. Across the room, Amara noticed Robert Winters deep in conversation with a young black woman, his daughter, the civil rights attorney, who had initially been the program's harshest critic. Now she was grudgingly involved, providing legal oversight and pushing them to go further with their reforms. Nearby, Chief Peterson was speaking with community leaders, looking uncomfortable but engaged. The program had forced him out of his office and into neighborhoods he rarely visited, facing hard questions from residents who had good reason to distrust the police. A tap on her shoulder made Amara turn. Officer Dawson stood there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I wanted to say thank you, he said quietly. Not just for the second chance, but for pushing me to actually use it. Amara studied him. The man before her was not the same one who had towered over her on that roadside 6 months ago. There was a humility to him now, a thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. You did the work, she acknowledged. Not everyone would have. There's still a lot more to do, Dawson admitted. Yes, Amara agreed. This is just the beginning. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of teenagers, participants in the Youth Advisory Board that had been formed to give young people a voice in police reform. They surrounded Amara and Dawson, eager to share their latest ideas. Later that evening, after most of the crowd had dispersed, Amara found herself sitting on a bench outside the community center. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She was tired but satisfied. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Just saw you on the news. Your father's pretending he's not crying. We're so proud of you, baby. Amara smiled, typing back a quick reply. As she put her phone away, she noticed someone approaching. An elderly black woman walking with a teenage boy who looked to be her grandson. Dr. Johnson? The woman called out hesitantly. Yes? Amara stood, smoothing her skirt. I just wanted to shake your hand, the woman said. My grandson here, he wants to be a police officer. Has since he was little, but lately, with everything in the news, I've been scared for him. Scared of him wearing that uniform. Scared of what it might do to him. The boy looked embarrassed but proud as his grandmother spoke. After seeing what you're doing, the woman continued, I'm a little less scared. Maybe by the time he's old enough, things will be different. Amara shook the woman's hand, then the boy's. What's your name? She asked him. Andre, he replied. I want to help people. That's why I want to be a cop. That's a good reason, Amara told him. We need more officers who think that way. After they left, Amara remained on the bench thinking about Andre and his grandmother, about Luis and his family, about all the people affected by the systems she was trying to change. The door to the community center opened, and Robert Winters stepped out. He spotted Amara and joined her on the bench. Quite a day, he remarked. Yes, Amara agreed. You know, when I first called you that night after the incident, I never expected all of this. He gestured toward the community center with its new sign announcing it as the headquarters for the Police Transformation Initiative. Neither did I, Amara admitted. I was angry. I wanted justice. And now? She considered the question. I still want justice. But I've realized it looks different than I thought. Winters nodded. That's the thing about transformation. It rarely happens the way we expect. As darkness fell over the neighborhood, lights came on in the surrounding houses. From somewhere nearby, music played and children laughed. Life continuing as it always did, but perhaps with a little more hope than before. We're going to face pushback, Winters warned. Not everyone wants change, even when it's for the better. I know, Amara replied. She'd built a tech empire. She understood resistance to innovation, but we'll keep going anyway. She thought about how far they'd come since that day on the roadside, how an incident that could have ended in tragedy had instead sparked something unexpected. Not perfect, not complete, but meaningful. As she finally stood to leave, Amara looked back at the community center with its lights still burning bright against the darkening sky. 6 months ago, she couldn't have imagined standing on a stage with Officer Dawson, presenting a unified front. She couldn't have imagined feeling hopeful about police reform. Yet here she was, having turned one of the worst experiences of her life into a catalyst for change. The journey had just begun, but for the first time, the destination seemed possible. Sometimes, Amara reflected as she walked to her car, transformation began with the most unlikely people in the most unexpected moments.